Bah humbug. That seems like the universal word for have a not so merry Christmas. Or maybe it's like the Christmassy way of saying an even worse word. I don't know. I wasn't around when they invented that word. I hope that today that you're not feeling exactly like Scrooge McDuck is feeling about the holidays. But we have been acknowledging over the past couple of weeks that Christmas is not easy, that Christmas has all kinds of emotions. There's pain, there is anxiety, there's a lot of chaos at this time of year, and so we want to acknowledge that. And we've been doing that in this series called Mixed Blessings, that Christmas is a mixed blessing. Life is a mixed blessing. And as we have looked at the Jesus story over the past couple of weeks, we've also noticed that that story contains many mixed blessings. And certainly, there are all kinds of mixed blessings in some of our favorite and most well-known Christmas stories. And today, we're going to take a look at the most well-known of all Christmas stories, other than, of course, the birth of Jesus. And it's also the most adapted Christmas story, or of all time. And more than that, it's actually the most adapted story of all time, period. There are over 100 adaptations of this book. And it's A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. There have been many direct adaptations. And then there have been some more indirect adaptations. Very indirect. It gets a little loose. And then maybe something that no one saw coming, a Barbie Christmas Carol. Something that I did not have on my 2023 bingo card was Scrooge Barbie. I feel like that would have played really well in the Barbie movie. I wish there would have been a Scrooge Barbie. But nonetheless, at the center of every version of A Christmas Carol, there is a Scrooge. And as most of us probably know, Scrooge is wealthy, and Scrooge is bitter, and Scrooge is closed off to the world, and Scrooge does not have an experience of love and openness, particularly around the holidays. And so what happens in every version or every iteration of the Christmas Carol is that Scrooge is visited by three ghosts: the ghosts of Christmas past, the ghost of Christmas present, and the ghost of Christmas yet to come, or as we often say, the ghost of Christmas future. And one of these ghosts have to tell Scrooge, but really, hey, this is your life. This is who you are. This is the truth of who you are, and this is the truth of your past. This is the truth of your present, and this is what will become if nothing changes. And when I've wondered, why is this such a universal story, that it's been adapted so many times, it's such a part of our language when we talk about Christmas, that word Scrooge. And I think it's because, for one, we all know, and we've probably all been at times, a Scrooge. We all know a Scrooge, and we've all been a Scrooge. Let's just be honest. And secondly, we've all been haunted by the ghosts of the past, the present, and the future. So first, if we're going to look at how we all relate to this, let's ask ourselves, really, who is Scrooge? Well, first off, he's someone who has great fashion, and in particular when it comes to his pajamas, some great nightwear. I feel like we need that cap to come. I'm missing it. I want it to come back in. I think it'll come back pretty soon. But also, Scrooge, as described in the book, is squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous, hard and sharp as flint, secret and self-contained, and solitary as an oyster. When I look at those words, that set of descriptions, if I'm being honest, I can see myself. I can see myself in my harder moments, in anxiety and depression. I can see the squeezing, wrenching, grasping. I won't name them all, but how many of you can see little bits and pieces of yourself in moments in that description? See, when I think about the spiritual journey and the practice and the rhythm of growing and attempting to integrate and attempting to learn and develop, what I'm led to see is that we often go back and forth a little bit, right? Like, we want to be open, But yet there's a part of us that wants to close. Or we want to surrender. We want to let go of things. And yet there's a part of us that is grasping for control. We want to be giving. We want to be generous. And yet there is a part of us that wants to take. And we know that we want to live in community. We want to be open to other people. And yet there is a part of us that wants to be solitary as an oyster. And so when I think about Scrooge, and I think about these descriptions, I also think about the spiritual journey and the part of us that experiences resistance, the part of us that has a hard time opening up. See, how many of us have had times in our lives where through various reasons, through various experiences and circumstances, we needed to close off our hearts. We wanted to shut down. We wanted to put walls up, often in order to feel safe and in order to feel secure. We shut down. We close off. We put up walls. And it can be so hard to climb over those walls. It can be so hard to self-transcend. And many times it's simply because we don't want to. Like, how many of us have been upset at something or someone, and you're kind of just like, I think I want to be mad right now. I think I just want to stew a little bit. Just give me a sec. I just want to feel this, right? It's part of life. It's part of modern life. And we see it in Scrooge. And there are also actually other versions of Scrooge all over the place. One of my favorite modern Scrooges is someone named Larry David. I don't know if you all know who Larry David is. If you don't know who Larry David is, he's the creator of the television show Seinfeld, and he also created a show called Curb Your Enthusiasm, in which he essentially is playing a really exaggerated, extra Scroogey version of himself, that because of his wealth, he also is disconnected from reality, and so he basically just calls everyone out on his pet peeves all day long. And yet, when I show you this next clip of how Larry David is like a modern-day Scrooge, maybe if you're like me, you can't help but see a little bit of yourself.
I did get the invitation.
Yeah.
Yes, and I paid so little attention to it that I didn't even bother to RSVP. Because I shouldn't have been invited in the first place. I was offended that I was invited.
So let me get this straight. I'm
There's
going to
nothing
eat
to get
alone.
straight.
I'm going to eat alone tomorrow.
Why do you want to eat with me?
Because we never get a chance to eat in L.A.
Because we're not friends.
We're not friends because we never spend time together.
We don't spend time together because I don't want to spend time together.
Is it possible that you have a little room for growth?
No. Duckstein, I think we've taken this about as far as we can. There'll be no lunch, no breakfast, or dinner. There won't be a snack. There won't be coffee. There won't be a drink. And hopefully there won't even be another bump into.
I feel badly for you because life is like this.
Yes.
And what you've done is made it like this.
I want to make that smaller.
Really?
Yes. Shrink it. Put the hands together. That's what I want. See you, Duckstein.
Bye, Larry.
We've all had moments like that. We look at our life and we go, you know what? I could use it being a little smaller right now. Because there are times when making things smaller, it allows us to feel safe. It allows us to feel in control. Because the truth is, friends, the world doesn't always feel safe. It doesn't always feel under control. The world can be scary. And we all have past hurts and reasons why we want to make the world a little smaller. Think about our friend, the Grinch. As we learn, for any of you who have experienced any adaptation of the Grinch story, as we learn, the Grinch has experienced some past trauma. The Grinch has experienced some valid reasons why the world feels unsafe and scary for him. And so as we see in his story, he at first chooses to suffer and chooses to isolate because in his own way, it still feels safer. And yet the Grinch and Scrooge both experience journeys of their hearts opening. In the case of the Grinch, we hear that his heart expands to 3 times its size, right? And yet in order for those characters to receive that kind of heart opening, they must first be faced with the reality of who they are. of what their life is actually leading them towards. And so Scrooge is visited on Christmas Eve by the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future. And in the ghost of Christmas past, what is shown to him is some of the trauma he experienced as a child, and also some of those moments when he prioritized money over love, over connection. He's then shown his present, not just the present that he's experiencing, but a fuller version of the present, an expanded awareness where we can see how his actions in the present have affected others. Have you ever had moments like that where you were given a view, an expanded view of how the way that you were being, the way that you were showing up in the world was actually affecting other people? Maybe it was a hard conversation with a loved one where they said, maybe you don't realize it, but when you do this, I feel something. When you say that thing or when you act that certain way, it affects me in a way that you may not have even realized. So sometimes we're confronted with an expanded awareness of our present. But of course, Scrooge is also confronted with his future. And the ghost of Christmas future shows him the natural conclusion of the way he has already been living his life. That if nothing changes and he continues the way that he is going, that this is what will become of him. And what he has shown is that he will die alone, that those in his circle will be happy he's gone, and that all this good that he could have done with all this wealth and resources that he did have, all of that remains undone. Here's a clip that gives us a sense of what Scrooge sees when he's confronted with the ghost of Christmas future.
Am I in the presence of the ghost of Christmas yet to come? Spirit, I fear you more than any spectre I have yet met.
Oh, this is too scary. I don't think I want to see any more.
Oh, when you're right, you're right. You're on your own, folks. We'll meet you at the finale.
Yeah. Oh.
I am prepared to follow and to learn with a thankful heart. Will you not speak to me? Oh, yes. The night is waning fast. Lead on, Spirit.
No, I don't know much about it either way. I only know he's dead.
Yeah. When?
Last night, I believe.
Wonder what he died of. I thought he'd never go.
Well, I don't know or care why he's gone. I'd just like to know what he's done with his money.
Wouldn't we all?
Well, he didn't give it to me. No. Well, it's likely to be a cheap funeral. I don't know a single soul who'd go to it.
I wouldn't mind going. If lunch is provided.
Speaking of lunch...
Sometimes the hard truths go down a little easier when it's the Muppets. But if we're going to understand the power of what Scrooge is being confronted with, then we need to understand some things about time and how we experience time and how time shows us things and really what time is and what time isn't. See, time is a construct. Time is a way that we arrange ourselves. Time is something that we choose to engage in. It's like a technology. It's a language that we use to make meaning. But it's not objective so much as it is subjective, which I use all the time to get out of problems, right? Like if I'm ever late, I'm always like, time's not real. Time is a construct. I didn't agree to your construct of time, so yes, I'm 3 hours late, but, that's not my problem. No, time is subjective, and we know this because time passes differently in different experiences, right? Like when we're in times of joy, time seems to go like that, and when we're in difficulty and pain, time seems to slow down. The word merry in Merry Christmas actually translates from the German, and it's really, in its most basic translation, it just means, may your time pass swiftly because that you are in an experience of joy. So may your time pass fast like joy. And so time is something we agree upon, whether it's years, months, weeks, days, hours, minutes. These are man-made labels. And even though nature has seasons, it places no label. That the seasons are one continuous process, and that time is a social institution and not a physical reality, says Alan Watts. There is no such thing as time in the natural world, the world of stars and waters, clouds, mountains, and living organisms. There is such a thing as rhythm, rhythm of tides, rhythm of biological processes. There is rhythm and there is motion. Time is a way of measuring motion. So time as we know it, it's not objective, it's agreed upon, and yet it gives us this gift of allowing us to experience meaning, to measure motion, to measure our lives. And things matter, as we know, because of the time that we put into things. That we are able to measure change, we're able to measure our own healing, our own growth. We're able to reflect upon where we've been and where we're going, and we are able to have gratitude because of time. And one of the most important things that time gives us, one of the most important aspects of what time allows us to experience, is cause and effect. Cause and effect. How many of us, at one stage or another in our journey, measured morality through the definition of the word sin? Things are good or bad because they are sinful or not. And you might have asked someone in authority, well, why is this sinful? And they would say, well, because it is. Well, and you would say, well, why? And if they were being really honest, they would say, well, I don't know, but it's really fun, but we're just not supposed to do it. But maybe in your journey, what you have found is that instead of using that word sin, what you have found is more broadly, if we look at life, we see that every action has a cause and effect played out over time. That certain actions over time will lead to certain outcomes. And maybe these outcomes may cause pain for yourself and pain for others. Or other actions may cause healing for yourself and healing for others. Or maybe some actions don't really do much of anything for anyone. But what's true is that there is this law of cause and effect. I'll give you an example. If you go to school for many years to become a dentist, you're probably going to have a hard time finding a job as a zookeeper. It's just not what you put the time into. Or if you spend your entire life refusing how to learn how to swim, and then one day you go on a cruise and you get thrown overboard, you're not going to have a good time, you know? Or maybe if you're like me, your check engine light comes on and you spend a week ignoring it, and then 2 weeks, and then a month ignoring it. You're probably going to end up with a large mechanic bill. Cause and effect. Or maybe if you listen to country music over and over and over again, you'll become a Republican. It's just cause and just cause and effect. I'm just kidding. I don't know if that's true. Friends, the value of our choices, I wonder if we would ask ourselves today, maybe it's not that our choices are inherently good or bad. It's that we might ask, is this choice, is this course of action, is this giving me what I want? Is this behavior, is this pattern serving me? Is it actually allowing me to lead the life that I want to lead? And so this gift that Scrooge is given is that he's given this really embodied space and opportunity to ask these questions. What is it about my past that has caused this present that I'm living in? And what is it about this present that will inevitably create this future? And what he realizes in this experience is that, no, that future is not what he wants. That he wants something different. He wants something better. He says our courses, I'll back up, Our courses will foreshadow certain ends to which, if persevered in, they must lead. But if the courses be departed from, the ends will change. Now, this is a really old English, fancy schmancy way of saying, yeah, keep doing what you're doing, and you'll probably get the same result. Try something new, and maybe something new will happen. How many of us had moments in our lives where we realized, well, if I don't change, if I don't make an adjustment here, I can see what this is leading me towards. I can envision the result. Maybe you're like me and you recognize, okay, I can see some things that happened in my past, maybe some difficulties in childhood, maybe some trauma, and I realize how that's led to the human being I am today. And so I can see some of the work that I might need to do. And you might also say, well, if I don't do that work, I can see how that will continue to affect my life. Maybe I'll have a harder time relating and connecting with other people. Maybe in some ways I'll end up a little bit more alone. So maybe the ghosts appear to us and they confront us about our internal state. Or maybe sometimes the ghosts show up in your life as, say, a doctor telling you, hey, if you change this habit, it might work out for you, because if you don't, maybe it's going to turn into something that affects your life in a more severe way. A couple of years back, I was on staff at a large evangelical megachurch, and one of the ministries that was had at that church was something called Celebrate Recovery. And if you don't know what Celebrate Recovery is, it essentially is a Christian version of the 12-step program. And so each meeting, I would come in and we'd do some music for them. And each meeting there would be someone who would get up and share their testimony. And each of these testimonies contained what I would consider to be a rock bottom moment, a moment in which the person telling the story realized that if they didn't change their behavior, if they didn't change the patterns in their life, maybe they were going to lose their spouse, or maybe they would end up without a relationship with their children. And yet it was also this rock bottom moment that represented when the story began to turn around. It was that part of the arc, like Scrooge is experiencing, where they're confronted with truth and they're given an opportunity to change. And these stories tended to have some very happy endings. And I will say that this ministry and that space was one of the most joyful spaces that I had ever been in, because you had a group of people who had truly been to hell and back and had truly met with the ghosts of the past and the present and the future. See, friends, sometimes in life there is such a thing as a good haunting. That the ghosts of the past, the present, and the future, I don't think they're here to ruin our lives. I don't think they're simply here to freak us out, though they probably will, judging by, some of the images. But I think what they're really here to do is to give us a gift. And see, the haunting can come in a variety of forms. Sometimes we are haunted by our world, by what we see in the world, by the truth of our world. Take, for example, our environment, our home, Earth. And for so long, some ghosts of the past and the present have been warning us about the future, saying, hey, everyone, it's getting really hot, okay? It's getting real hot. Are we going to do something about it? Or maybe it's taking a look at history and looking at the ghosts of the past, which have told us that empires and freedom and democracy, if we just look at history, we see that all of these things are very fragile. And so the ghosts of the past are going, hey, everyone, just want to remind you, every empire that has ever existed has fallen. So don't take where you are for granted. Don't take some of the freedoms that you have for granted, because it's all very fragile. Or maybe this Christmas we may even turn our attention towards Christianity and recognize that before Christianity was a rich and powerful religion, before it was associated with buildings, budgets, crusades, colonialism, or televangelism, it began as a revolutionary, nonviolent movement promoting a new kind of aliveness on the margins of society. Maybe this December, maybe the haunting that we need is to be haunted by Christ. And maybe to be haunted by Christ is to ask ourselves, where are the margins today and who are on the margins today? Maybe those on the margins today are those suffering under unjust wars. Maybe those on the margins today are those making minimum wage or less while wealth gets concentrated into fewer and fewer hands. Maybe those on the margins today are those who have to travel out of their state in order to receive life-saving medical care, particularly women. When we look at the origin of Christmas, when we look at the ghosts of Christmas past, may we remember that Jesus was born as a poor subject of the most powerful military empire that the world had ever seen, suffering under their unjust rule. And certainly, in the United States, we would have no concept of what it means to be under the subject of the most powerful military empire the world had ever seen. We would have no way of relating to that. What with, the 750 bases in 80 countries, or the fact that we spend more on our military than the next 10 countries combined, certainly we wouldn't have any idea of what that's like. But if we could just, for our imagination, imagine what it might be like. Maybe to be haunted by Christ this Christmas is to say, maybe there's another way than just simply participating in the system as we have been and just saying everything's fine, let's just keep going as normal. Maybe there's another way, and maybe Jesus and all the other great spiritual teachers of other spiritual traditions were also inviting us into that other way of seeing. We might call it the third way type of seeing, because so often we get stuck in this two-dimensional, two-way perspective. It's either us or them. There are winners and there are losers. In order for there to be peace, there has to be a victor and there has to be a loser. This is the way that the world has worked for so long, and I believe that Jesus has given us a view into another way, what we might call third-way consciousness. And see, in the very part of the world that the first Christmas story takes place, today in Palestine, there is another conflict that I believe is caught up in this two-way mentality, that you're either with us and you're against them, or you're against them and you're with us. And I think Jesus was inviting us into a way of seeing that transcends the us or them mentality. And so, friends, maybe to be haunted is to experience a disruption in our current way of thinking. See, when the divine, when reality, or maybe if the word God works for you, when God comes crashing into our lives, like the ghosts of Christmas, it's rarely at a time that's convenient, right? It's rarely on our terms, right? It's a disruption. When I was growing up, my grandmother, she was a bit of a Scrooge in my life, if I'm being honest, in that I was afraid of her. And she wasn't the most warm grandmother. And, I just didn't really know her, and she kind of kept to herself. And I was just very intimidated by her. She was kind of like a Scrooge. And what I found out much later in my life as I became an adult is I began to recognize, she had a really hard life. And she had come here from the Philippines when she was a teenager. And through many aspects of her story that are hers to tell, she had had a very challenging life here, adjusting and finding her way in the United States. And so now I look back and I can understand the cause and effect that led her to the experience that she was having when I was a child and how I perceived her. But around this time, my family moved in with her. And like the ghosts of Christmas, we haunted her. See, she had had her small little life that worked for her, and we came in and we disrupted it. And at first, it was very explosive. But over a number of years, what it began to do was invite her to a bigger, more expansive view of reality. It invited her to a way of opening her heart. She began to engage with the world more. She got a new job that, as far as I could tell, is the most rewarding and fulfilling job she had ever had. Her life began to bloom and open up in so many ways. And to this day, she is really the center of our family, and she is one of the people that I'm closest to in the world, and she is just full of joy and life. She experienced this 180 shift, not because everything was able to go business as usual, but because of a disruption that invited her to see things in a new way. See, the disruptions, friends, can be incredible gifts. Can you think about those moments in your life when something changed, a circumstance shifted, and it was not what you would have asked for? And yet it invited new life, new birth into your world. When I think about the pandemic, I think about this global experience of disruption, this global haunting that we all experienced. To be faced with the reality of our past and our present and our future. And time will tell if, as a world, as a society, if we are able to really learn the lessons that we're being taught. But this Christmas, friends, would you take stock of your life? Will we look at our lives? Will we really sit down for a moment? As we do, it's the end of the year. We're approaching a brand new year. Of course, this is when we come and really sit at the feet of time and really ask ourselves, like, who am I and what's happening in my life? And may we be honest with ourselves about what's working and what isn't working. Not as a judgment, not as, oh, I'm good or I'm bad, I'm sinful or I'm holy. No, just what is working? Are these lifestyles and patterns and behaviors serving me? See, Scrooge, he listens, he receives that hard truth, and ultimately he surrenders to it, and he makes a change. He opens up to love. He opens up to generosity. He opens up to the true joy of Christmas, and he says, I will honor Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all the year. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. I will not shut out the lessons that they teach. Over this next week, as we move towards Christmas Eve and Christmas, we are all going to feel the ghosts of the past, the present, and the future because, like Scrooge, they live within us. So may we not shut out the lessons that they have to teach us. And when we think about Jesus this year as a ghost of Christmas, would we recognize him among the rubble of military empires, fragile as a baby, birthing new hope and new consciousness into our world? So as we close this series and as we approach Christmas Eve, friends, when it comes to mixed blessings, we remember that it all belongs, it all lives within us, that you are worthy of love and you are worthy to belong just as you are. But if the ghosts of Christmas are saying, hey, there's more, there's something more for you, would you come on this journey with me? Maybe we should listen.